My Epiphany story involves the passing of my father. It was unexpected. My mother had passed away 2 months previous. He seemed to be in good health, was in his mid-80s, 86 I believe. But I received a call from my sister that he had passed away in his sleep, and it was a difficult time. And traveling back east to the funeral, they were in New Jersey where I was born and grew up. And it was a difficult time. The weather the day of the funeral was cold, windy, rainy, and it just had that cold, windy, and rainy feeling. Until after the service, we were on our way to the cemetery, and just as we got to the grounds of the cemetery, the sky opened up from the horizon and the sun started to come through, like the rays of the sun were coming through the clouds. And it was like the Lord had said, "Welcome home." And that kind of made the day more bearable and brought a smile to many of our faces among the tears. That's my Epiphany story.
Hi, I'm Margaret Shields. I'd like to tell you a story of my epiphany, or an encounter I had with God. It was in my late 20s, in the late 60s. I was a young mother, 3 children, and stay-at-home mom. Everything was going well. And then I began having headaches, unexplained, but it got worse, and so I began to seek some doctor's help, and the doctor was puzzled as well. So he scheduled me for testing in the hospital. It meant I would have to go and stay 3 days, and the idea of going to the hospital, which I, except for having my babies, had never been, was worrisome. And the more I thought about it, I had to wait about 2 weeks to get the scheduled appointments, and so that time just gave me lots of time to set up worrying, and fear set in. And I did pretty well during the days. I had to take care of the kids, and but at night that was a hard time. And I discovered for myself that not knowing what's the problem is worse than knowing, even if it's bad news, you can deal with it. So that was one thing I learned. But one night it was just too much, and I crept out of bed because I didn't want to wake my husband and make him worry more. And I went to the living room, sat on the couch, and just started to cry. And I sobbed, and I prayed, and I just let it all out. And an amazing thing to me happened. I just felt this amazing comfort and calm settled over me, and I knew God was with me, and I knew that He would be with me no matter what happened. But the feeling I got from that encounter with God has never left me, and I just always feel like He's with me. So I thank God for that.
One day I was running late for class, and I went down and my car wouldn't start. I lived within walking distance, so I just grabbed my stuff and I started running out the door and towards campus. And in doing so, I stumbled into a friend, well, someone from class that I didn't really know very well. And we got to chatting, and he was running late for class as well. He didn't look like he was having a very good morning either. I said, "Hey, after class, why don't we get a coffee or something?" And our relationship blossomed from there. And years later, at a dinner, he told me that he was actually contemplating self-harm that day. And part of what stopped him was the realization that good things can happen, and that other people can have really bad days. I had shared my experiences. And we have a really good friendship. I haven't seen him in a number of years. But I think about these small moments in my life that in the whispers and in the wind, there's this sense that God's there and that God puts us into people's lives and into people's paths and people in our paths, that, you know, we are a tool for all that is good as much as people are a tool for bad things. So in thinking about an epiphany story, I've never felt like I've heard, you know, the sound of God's voice in my own life spoken out loud, and I was like, yep, that's it, that's God. But it's, again, in those quiet times, in those times of self-reflection when I think, how could I have possibly survived, you know, different things in my life. And I know I did it because I have strength through God and through Jesus that pulls me through. And I've given so much to other people as well. I value what we do for each other and how our lives fit into other people's stories and other people's epiphanies. And I guess that's my big epiphany moment, is realizing that it's not one big event that you can necessarily look back on, but all of the small undulations in life that keep us going and keep others going.
Hello, I'm Gail Anderson, and my epiphany story happened some 40 years ago. I had a dream that I was descending stairs into a very dark place. And about halfway down the stairway, I was met by Jesus, and he was light. And I turned around and followed him into the light. I don't remember being in a dark place at the time, but it's a comfort to me to know that he's with me always.
So in thinking about my personal epiphany and looking at my life and different things like that, it's kind of a simple epiphany, but it's kind of also vast at the same way. I do photography. I like to get out, hike a lot, and explore. One of the things that has always just been an epiphany for me is how much of God is in the natural world around us. Whether it's in something simple as the beach that you go to in the ocean, or it's the trees on your walk, or it's a simple walk through a garden. All those things are creations of God, and they're this epiphany of glory, like constantly.
Well, it's a very interesting story that I have to tell. I have a hummingbird feeder out off of my patio, and my hummingbird doesn't come too often, and I worry about him when he doesn't come. So one day I was feeling very sad because I had some very serious things to think about. One of them was about continuing to write like I've been trying to do for a while. And I just thought I was just going to tear everything up. And I thought, so in my head I said, well, if I see the hummingbird, then I'll know that's the answer to my prayer, whether I ought to continue what I'm doing. With tears streaming down my face, I went to my kitchen window, and there was my hummingbird. Back and forth, back and forth. So I felt like that God really wanted me to continue what I was doing. He sent the hummingbird to let me know that he still loved me.
I am Julia Harvey, and my story is that I was born to an unwed mother in Nebraska at Booth Memorial Hospital. And obviously she didn't choose to have me, and so she disappeared in 5 days, leaving me alone at Booth Memorial Hospital for the next 5 months. Thanks very much to the Nebraska Children's Home Society and Booth Memorial Hospital I was given as a gift to Kenneth and Marguerite Harvey. Little did I know it would be the greatest gift I'd ever received from God, was to grow up as their daughter. This is why my life is joyful, because I have every reason to be happy, happy, happy. And that's it.
My third story is one that I'm right in the middle of right now. I lost my husband 2 years ago. And he wasn't overly religious, although he believed in God and he would come to church with me, but he wasn't the weekly attender like I am. Of course, I felt like God was in our home and there was religion there, regardless of how it came about. But after he died, I lost it. That feeling wasn't there. I didn't want to come to church. It wasn't so much about not being around people. It's just I didn't have an interest in going. And he died in December, but and I kept kind of coming. Of course, I was in shock. But in the summertime, I just stopped. I just didn't have an interest. Didn't want to go. Kind of more of my senses were coming back. And so it's like starting all over. I feel like I'm in the middle of it. And I feel it. I do feel it. I feel the voice to help somebody. I feel the voice to do good. I feel the voice to come to church and be with people. I have had a couple situations where, because of my experience in losing somebody, I was able to help somebody, and I still feel like half a person. I'm not a whole person, and I'm growing, and I feel like I'm still trying to find who I am again. I'm trying to find and get myself back as a whole person. So there's been situations like that where I've come across people that have lost their spouse or a loved one, where I felt that maybe that's something that I will be able to do in the future. So I'm in the middle of it, and the story will be continued.
You know how your life goes in ups and downs and highs and lows. I was in a very deep low. I considered it walking through the valley. And that was about 37 years ago. And in my deepest low, I was at church one Sunday, and I can't remember if it was a church service in the evening or during the day, but we had communion. And back then, the choir was in the chancel area, and we were invited to kneel at the railing after communion. And so I knelt at the railing and was giving my prayers and feeling so low and lost and lonely. And I felt the hand of the Lord on this shoulder, and the weight of the hand was there. And then I heard, "You're not alone." And of course, in my normal way of wanting to figure out what's going on, I turned around to look, and there was no one there. No one around me anywhere. And I knelt there for a little while longer, and tears welled in my eyes. And to this day, when I'm feeling depressed or alone, I feel that weight, and I hear the voice, "You're not alone." And that's my moment.
Well, my story is, back before I started working for the post office, I worked for a trust plant. And I was working there about 2 years, and I'd worked up to what I thought was, a level of responsibility or whatever. And all of a sudden I had an accident, and management basically told me I lost my privileges, which were, I got the keys to the gate to get in. I had the responsibility of driving the vehicles to job sites and stuff. And 3, I had a lot of overtime. Just all of a sudden it cut off. They told me I lost all those because of my accident. and I was devastated, and I was staying up one night because I couldn't sleep, and all of a sudden I realized those three things basically were of this earth. It wasn't of the spiritual. And I realized those three things basically were what I thought were so important that I basically was grieving that I lost them. And I suddenly realized God was telling me that these things are here, but they're not that important. So I basically broke down and I cried the hardest I've ever cried probably in my life, since maybe I was a small child. But I realized that God did have purpose for me, and I had to keep my eye on what was important. And these three things, though they were important in the world, they were not that important to me. So I realized that, he had a purpose for me, but these things were not the ones I needed to seek. So that's my story, that's my epiphany.